Bringing Bob Costas, the Hall of Fame sportscaster and host of the Olympics many, 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 many times. If I would have told you 20 years ago, 15 years ago, hey, Snoop's going to be
Yeah.
co-hosting the Olympics, you would have said what?
Dan, what a crushing blow it's going to be when next spring Snoop Dogg is the guy who denies you the sports host Emmy yet again.
Wow.
That is
Wow.
just going to be it's wrong on so many levels, but it's inevitable.
All right, I see where we are. We've established the battlegrounds already, Bob. Shot across the bow. Okay. But, the Olympics are about celebrating,
Yep.
showcasing. Would you have pushed back if that was a suggestion by management that they were going to incorporate Snoop?
I think the tide was flowing in a direction that it just would have gobbled me up and taken me out to sea. Look, Snoop is a very personable guy. I'd encountered him once a few years ago, and he was very knowledgeable about sports. We mostly talked about the NBA, and I had a brief encounter with him along with Al Michaels at the beach volleyball venue when I was in Paris last week. He's high spirited about it. I get it. I get what the appeal is. And if I was hosting, as long as it didn't encroach upon in any way what you're primarily there for, then it's just a side dish. It's a large side dish in this case, but it's a side dish.
How has social media changed the Olympic coverage?
I guess it's even more out there than before. The last time I hosted was 2016. But the thing that strikes me, and I'm not an expert on this because I'm not following all the reactions from the general public, but the athletes themselves, all of them, even those who are elder statesmen, which might mean that they're 30 years old, they grew up with social media. So they're posting throughout. Who was the pole vault woman from the United States who decided to twerk? And some people loved it and some people didn't. But her answer was, look, I make money off of this. I have popularity because of this. It's second nature now. And another thing that I've noted is this. Every Olympian, just about, is going to have a catalog of childhood photos and videos because everybody all around the world has the phone. So the entire life of the child, from birth through whatever, has been filmed. And so it's almost a ready-made documentary, or ready-made for the Olympic profiles. Here's Duplantis, Mondo Duplantis, when he was pole vaulting like off his bed when he was 3 years old.
I was wondering if consciously, subconsciously, you did this. I think I did, and that is that you kind of root for Team USA when you're hosting, even though you're supposed to be covering the Olympics. Did you ever find that you kind of blurred the lines there?
Not really, because Team USA almost always did well enough that there were going to be lots of big moments and there are going to be medal winners brought into the studio. And I think your job is to be appreciative. We know that the coverage is going to lean toward the home team. In Britain, it leans toward athletes from England, the UK. Same thing in Australia. Everywhere you go to parts of the world, they'll show a whole lot of badminton because in Pakistan, they're really good at it. In Canada, even if the Canadians don't win a whole lot of medals, and they've done well in these Olympics, they're going to lean, the CBC is going to lean in that direction. That's not unique to the United States, but I think it's our job, or was my job when I hosted it, to be aware and appreciative of the accomplishments of all the athletes, no matter where they came from.
What do you remember about the Dream Team?
The mania that surrounded it. Walking down the Ramblus in Barcelona and seeing like a 15-story building from the sidewalk to the roof of the building with a Michael Jordan mural on it. The mania that surrounded them. And also the idea that their opponents, and in most cases in 92, their victims, enjoyed it. It was the guy was it Angola?
Yeah.
Who wanted to take I guess back then selfies were kind of a new thing. The ball goes out of bounds and he wants a selfie with Barkley before the ball's put back in play. And I also remember Marv Albert in typical dry Marv style. I threw it out to him for the first game. I think it was the Dream Team against Angola. And he says, Bob, bookmakers in Luanda have taken this one off the board.
Have you ever experienced anything close to just the admiration, the fandom that we had with the Dream Team?
Not exactly, because you had a lot of buildup prior to all those players, not just Jordan, Magic, Bird, every member of that team, with the exception of Christian Laettner. And Christian may be in the Hall of Fame because the Basketball Hall of Fame, as you know, combines amateur and pro. So he may be in because of what he did at Duke. But apart from that, every other member of the team is a Hall of Famer. But that fame, at least in the United States, preceded that. And then the reverberations continued into the subsequent NBA seasons. So I think it's kind of in a separate category.
How do we know a city did well in the Olympics?
Well, there's just a vibe feeling. There's always a bottom line feeling. The Greeks got the Olympics in 2004 because of their historic connection to it. But a nation of only 10, 12 million people probably can't put it on again. And there was a huge economic cost, and a lot of the venues now just sit there with weeds growing because they have no use for it subsequently. But the vibe in Paris is incredible. It just feels like a success. It feels right. And even watching at home, wherever home is, the United States or anywhere around the world, this is a huge bounce back from the last three Olympics, especially the last two. I think Tokyo would have been an excellent host, but we'll never know because it's under COVID circumstances. There's no fans in the stands. And then with the same circumstances in place, all the restrictions, no fans, when they went back to China for another Olympics, I think by then the understanding around the world that China is a serious human rights abuser and just a mockery of the supposed Olympic ideals, that turned people off. Now, the COVID circumstances are largely behind us, Noah Lyles notwithstanding.
Yeah.
And there are fans in the stands. It's a beautiful setting. Everywhere you look, it's a postcard. It's not just the Eiffel Tower. It's not just the Louvre. I was driving to one of the games with Al Michaels, one of the events rather. And I said, Al, in the average American city, maybe not DC or New York or whatever, in the average American city, the 20th most appealing building we will see on this ride would be the centerpiece building in that city. That's just what Paris is. And this could be the beginning of the Olympics getting its groove back, because Milan Cortina seems like an appealing setting for the next Winter Olympics. And then it's in Los Angeles. And from an American standpoint, despite all the challenges of putting it on and security and everything else, there's going to be a big vibe for that. So, Paris, I think, is the start of something really good for the Olympic movement.
Talking to Bob Costas, I was wondering if the IOC, and I know there's so much money at stake here and getting bids from other countries, but could they do a rotation? Doesn't a rotation make the most sense because it doesn't economically damage or, these cities?
Yeah.
And even if you have multiple cities involved, it could be the West Coast could bring you the Olympic Games, not just the city of Los Angeles.
Yeah, that makes some sense. It does. And maybe you could farm out certain events. Maybe you run the marathon. You always run the marathon in Greece. You always run it in Athens, to keep that connection. You could probably identify, let's say, 4 or 5 really good host cities for a Winter Olympics, be a different sort of 4 or 5 around the world for a Summer Olympics. We know that the IOC is intent on spreading its wings. They're going back to Australia. That's a good thing. Australia was a good host in 2000, and there's going to be another one in the years ahead. They put several in Asia, and that's a good thing. As soon as they can find the right nation and the right city to host, they want to put an Olympics in Africa. And those are all good intentions. But to your point, it's becoming more and more challenging. And a lot of times, what happened with Beijing, I'm not making excuses for the IOC, but a lot of the other more classic Winter Olympic sites backed out because of the cost and other issues, security and everything else. So the list of possibilities is shrinking. So to your point, it might make sense to have some permanent sites and rotate them.
Baseball topics, if you will. Paul Skeens against the Dodgers coming up on Saturday. Who comes to mind? Well, I guess Dwight Gooden, but who comes to mind that had sort of this must-see TV as far as a pitcher?
Vida Blue, when he started with the A's, was like that. Fernando
Yeah.
pitched like 8 shutouts in his first 10 starts or something like that with the Dodgers. Fernando mania for a while. There was a whole lot of hype surrounding Steven Strasburg. And in his first game, he struck out 14 against the Pirates, as it happened. And he had some good years, and he was the MVP of the World Series in 2019. But injuries kind of took him off what could have been a Hall of Fame track. And your point about Gooden is absolutely correct. And, there are some athletes where the objective accomplishments are one thing, and then there's just the poetry of it. Dwight Gooden was just beautiful to watch. His motion, the fluidity of it, that classic 12-6 curveball to go with the high heat. And back then, and I don't want to sound like back in my day, Sonny, but back then, great pitchers finished what they started. And so they're on the mound when the game ends, and Gary Carter comes out and, shakes hands with Dwight Gooden. We're in an era where Blake Snell, who had won 2 Cy Young Awards, just pitched his first complete game, and only because it was a no-hitter. So I think that, some of the drama and theater is taken away there. I understand all the modern analytics. I'm not saying it isn't the right strategic approach, but from the standpoint of theater, we're never going to see Bob Gibson on the mound as the World Series ends, or Sandy Koufax on 2 days rest in the 7th game of the World Series, strikes out the last guy and the World Series ends. That tableau has been taken away.
Okay, but we're going to have to modify our Hall of Fame expectations for starting pitching.
Yep. Yeah, it's true. You're going to get people in the Hall of Fame with fewer than 200 victories. Dizzy Dean had fewer than 200, but he got injured and had established Hall of Fame credentials. Koufax is the best example. I think he won only 165, but for that 5-year stretch, he was the best pitcher on the planet, maybe the best pitcher of all time. You could certainly make a case for him. But generally speaking, 200 was a threshold. 300 was a cinch. But no one's ever going to win 300 again because you just can't get that many decisions anymore. So I think you could very well see a guy with 140 wins, but with a good ERA, and the analytics line up, especially as the electorate changes and younger voters who have grown up with this as the norm. No problem with that. That's their norm. They'll be more receptive to that.
Well, it's almost like the running back and the pitcher, the starting pitcher, are very, very similar. That we've reduced their necessity there, and we're going to have to reassess running backs because it's probably going to be more receptions, yards after the touch or whatever it might be, not necessarily running the football.
Plus, when you talk about 1,000-yard season, which used to be a benchmark, or the 2,000-yard season when OJ did it, that's a 14-game season. When Jim Brown broke into the league, it was a 12-game season. Then 14, then 16, now 17. So, all those have to be taken into account on a percentage basis.
You could have picked other rooms in your apartment, right?
No, this is the one that works best. And I swear, I said to Eric, your guy there, your production guy there, I know where you're going with this. I have a sense where you're going with this. It's what's behind me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I tried to crop the shot so that it wasn't there. But when I do this, now I cut the top of my head off. That's as far as I can go. Does that help?
Yeah, but it's a message. I mean, you came out of the gate, Snoop Dogg's going to win the Emmy, and then you take this shot, and now we got sports Emmys over there. I mean,
yeah.
You could.
There's more over here. they don't all fit behind me. Look, here's a panoramic view there.
Yeah. All right, you got me.
all in good fun.
Bob, do you have any rooms without Emmys?
Yes, just a few.
Your wife won't let you have an Emmy in the bedroom, though.
No, that crosses the line.
Great to catch up with you. Thanks for joining us as always, buddy.
Thank you, Dan.
Take care. That's Bob Costas. That was great.